Imagine, if you will, making a Twitter post so based that the guy who runs the site, you know, the one who loves Roman salutes, gets so offended by it that he sends you a box of cockroaches just to torment you. Now, that was actually pretty close to the reality for Ina and David Steiner. One day they're watching Matlock or whatever old people watch on TV, and then suddenly you get a pig fetus delivered directly to your house and unmarked cars following you, and you have no idea why. And there actually was a why. There was a complete, not terribly sane reason, but there was a reason why. So today, we are going to look at the story of the Steiners' run-in with a vindictive CEO and all the chaos that ensued from it. Now, why the Steiners? No relation to Rick or Scott. But, if my math is correct, and it always is, there's a 33 and 1/3 chance that it had something to do with their job. Ina and David Steiner ran a website called E-commerce Bytes. It was a website that tracked all sorts of trends and news across the web. Everything from Etsy to Amazon and even eBay. It was founded in 1999 and became a resource to sellers on those sites, and after a while, they became a trusted voice in the community. The site offered advice to sellers, but also critiqued corporations that ran the selling platforms and policy changes. It was a great tool for sellers, but probably a thorn in the side of the companies that it critiqued. Ina wrote the articles, and David was more of the business guy. They were just a couple living the American dream of being influencers and helping people navigate the online minefield of the digital flea market. Now, nobody would suspect that these kind of people would have such evil or petty enemies. So, why them? Why the Steiners? To find this out, we're going to have to go back a little bit. We're going to have to rewind the clocks to 2019. August 8th, 2019. It started small. First, they would receive some weird emails for sites that they never signed up for, like Sin City Fetish Night, the Satanic Temple, and InfoWars. Now, Alex Jones is enough to drive anyone insane. The Steiners probably felt absolutely just harassed at this point, especially when they're pioneers, they're explorers,
I'm a human.
they're humans, and they're definitely coming.
I'm serious crap.
The harassment wouldn't stop there. They would also receive a ton of harassment on Twitter.
What's your problem with eBay? When you hurt our business, you hurt our families. I guess I'm going to have to get your attention another way, bitch.
A few days later, they got a bizarre phone call. Hello, I'm sorry, but we cannot fulfill the order for your wet specimen. Now, what in the Sam hell is a wet specimen? I assume David said. Turned out, it was a pig fetus. And I'm starting to think that someone might be a little bit mad at them. The harassment didn't slow down there either. They went out and found that their fence had been vandalized with spray paint with the words Phytomaster written all over it. Now, I don't know what a Phytomaster is, but I don't want to kink shame. Their home address had been doxed and put up on Craigslist for orgies.
I'm here for the gangbang.
Books on surviving the loss of a spouse were delivered directly to the house along with a bloody pig mask, which I'm 99% sure is from the movie Saw. For 3 whole weeks, packages and threats would keep coming even as the police continued to investigate. During this whole time, the Steiners, they turned inwards like hermits or a WoW gamer. They installed security cameras and started sleeping in separate rooms just in case if someone broke in, one of them would be able to call the police or escape. One day, in a rare event, they decided to leave the house. And this one action would blow the whole mystery wide open. On their way to the store, if I know Steiners, they were probably on their way to get pre-workout and more chainmail. One of the Steiners noticed a black car following them and was extremely suspicious, so they took a picture of this license plate. They gave this picture to the police, and the police ran the plates, and the plates came back as a rental, where a Veronica Zay rented the car. Now, what was so special about Veronica? Not much, other than being an employee of a group called Progressive Force Concepts, which was contracted of all things by eBay, like the company that the Steiners do articles on. Finally, getting a little bit of a lead here. The police tracked her down to a hotel and tried to get her to come down and talk. They went and spoke with her husband at the door, and he said that she'd be right down. However, she never showed up. She exited out the back door and hopped on a flight the hell out of there. And this one event would be extremely significant. Eventually, the feds would catch up to Zay, and once they sat her down, she spilled her guts out. Zay was really just a foot soldier who was left out to dry. She had issues of her own, which we'll come back to later, but Zay's group was working on a harassment campaign like you'd see in a cheesy movie, and it went as high up as the CEO of eBay himself. So what in God's green earth did the Steiners do to deserve this? Their job. They did their job. See, the Steiners, like I said, they would write articles about online platforms, and one of the ones they obviously wrote about was eBay, considering they're one of the bigger platforms in the world. When something is that big, it's bound to come up, and not every piece the Steiners wrote were puff pieces. They would occasionally write articles that were very critical of the platforms, and the then CEO, Devin Wenning, a man whose ego was as solid as Krumkaka, would read these articles and absolutely mauled and seethe. Wenning and his cabal of eBay execs would meet and just hate on the e-commerce bites. Almost as bad as me and my hatred of dolphins. They at first would just meet and rant and cope and seethe over the things that they could not let go. The Steiners lived absolutely rent-free in this man's head. One day, Ina Steiner wrote an article that unknowingly lit a fuse. This article was about how Devin would make 152 times the average salary of the other eBay employees. I wonder how he took it. Wenning was pissed. Not only was he mad about being called out, but a new investor really let him have it. An investment group going by Elliott Management that was run by professional bastard Paul Singer had acquired a significant amount of eBay stock. Elliott Management is a group that you just do not f*** with. They have all kinds of blood on their hands, from destabilizing Argentina for profit to dissolving Cabela's. That was my dad's favorite store, and I know they merged with Bass Pro Shop, but we don't have a Bass Pro Shop in my town, so that's not an option, thank you very much. Anyway, I'm off track. Around this time, Elliott Management had delivered a letter to the executives of eBay, and it read, "As a public company, investment has underperformed both its peers and the market for a prolonged period of time. In other words, get your house in order."
Well, then get your shit together. Get it all together and put it in a backpack. All your shit, so it's together.
From here, Wenning and his bestie, CCO, and Goblin War Chief, Steve Weimer, they brainstormed a couple ideas, and they came up with two possibilities that could probably help them out with this whole Elliott problem. They could improve the platform, help promote growth, and foster healthy changes within the company, and therefore getting Elliott Management off their back based off of the growth that they make. Or, option B, they could just silence all their critics in any way possible. They went with the option B. I wouldn't be making this video if they went with option A. They went with the second option, and they had two major targets in mind. With Ina's article coming out, they decided to go after her first, in what I'm assuming they're going to call Operation Fragile Ego. I was going to call it Operation Baby Penis, and say it was called that because this is some psycho stuff insecure men do to overcompensate, but that would be slander, and I'm not saying it because it would be slander.
I didn't do fucking shit.
But hypothetically, it would be funny. Dennis and Steve would enlist their security specialist, Jim Baugh. Jimmy Boy here has an impressive security resume. James Baugh, who may be a former CIA agent, headed up eBay's Department of Global Security and Resiliency, which worked directly with Veronica's group as well. Little Jimmy here would use this department to full-time harass the Steiners, and his band of misfits were right alongside him for the whole ride. Now, my man Jim, I think, just watched one too many movies, but he loved to show them to his staff as well. They'd sit down and watch a scene from American Gangster where someone gets shot. He'd go, "See what happens when people aren't loyal? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge." He also apparently found a knife on eBay campus and slammed that knife into an office chair like it was the goddamn sword of Excalibur, sitting there with his Knights of the Round Table of Harassment. Oh, he also harassed a woman named Stephanie Stockwell and blackmailed her into sleeping with him. So, great guy. Some of them even attributed the toxic environment into cult-like behavior, because we can't escape cults on this channel. On April 10th, 2019, Devin Wenning texted Steve Weimer a link to Ina's story, and he went into full Spurg mode. Steve replied, "We are going to crush this lady." Now, I did say that they had two major targets in mind. One other person who would feel the wrath of the eBay cabal was a guy going by Phytomaster. Hey, I brought it back. Good job, me. Yep, the name that was sprayed on the Steiner's fence, that was actually a username of somebody who was a major thorn in eBay's side. Also, going by Unsuck eBay on Twitter, Fido was a guy who would regular the forums and the forums on the e-commerce Byte site. They really hated this guy, no more than Steve Weimer did.
Okay.
Steve Weimer once said that he was, quote, utterly vexed by this. This Twitter account dominates our social narrative with his constant obsession with trolling us. Fido took this as a badge of honor and even referenced it in his Twitter bio. Possibly the last straw was when Ina wrote an article about eBay building a lavish New York-style pub lounge inside their campus. Fido tweeted this out, criticizing why the hell would they build such an expensive thing, all while eBay is experiencing a whole butt ton of layouts. But instead of actually paying people or doing anything like that, they built their own personal Cheers bar. Real ballsy to make your own personal Cheers bar when you have a group like Elliott Management breathing down your neck. With this article, the beacons had been lit, and Jim Bob here was told it is go time. With this, Jimmy Boy would get to work making the Steiner's life and one other guy's life an absolute living hell. Or at least try. Wenning messaged Jim Bean Baugh here saying Ina was, quote, a biased troll who needs to get burned down, unquote. I wonder what he meant by that. Very ambiguous. The harassment campaign was in full swing now, and Jimothy here was determined to make the Steiner's life hell. The plan was simple, but stupid. Step 1. Terrorize the absolute bejesus out of the Steiners until they reach a breaking point. And step B, have eBay swoop in and save the day, and the Steiners would be so grateful that they would only ever write nice things about them forever. Apparently, this is what is referred to as a white knight strategy. It's a tactic used in hostile takeovers to make one company prefer another bidder over the other, normally, or some stuff. I'm not a business major, but it's fairly straightforward. We all know it. I white knight for VTubers, please notice me bow, and my wife. I get nothing out of it, unfortunately, but fortunately, neither did Jimbo. So, he started this by sending his crew out to Natick, where the Steiners lived, and had one of his crew write Phytomaster on the fence. Baugh's investigation including taking a fake Twitter account and pretending to be an ex-eBay employee who engaged with Phytomaster to try to find some kind of connection to e-commerce Bytes. And with this, with the information that he kind of gathered, he wrote Phytomaster on their fence because he actually kind of believed that David Steiner was Phytomaster. Spoiler, a guy named Dan was Phytomaster, but that's neither here nor there. Jim tried to catfish him too, but Phyto was too smart, and Jim's just a moron. Part of Jim's plan as well was to coax him out into outing who Phytomaster was, but the Steiners actually didn't know who he was, like I said. Jim and his goons would then up the ante. They would go ahead and send naughty magazines to the Steiners and would make sure that a few of them appeared on their neighbors' doorsteps as well with the Steiners' name, trying to expose their gooning habits and make them look like degenerates to the whole neighborhood. They would get boxes of spiders and cockroaches sent to them, creepy phone calls, and of course, the angry messages. One from an account going by Tu Ile. Tu Ile would take credit for a bunch of the packages that the Steiners would get. They would also receive an expensive funeral wreath with a card saying sorry for your loss? Yet, that's just straight up evil. And if this didn't work though, if the Steiners' wills were strong enough and didn't succumb to the intimidation or refuse eBay's help in this white knight scheme, well, there's always a plan B. Now, while this all was happening, Devin was out there yucking it up somewhere in Europe, having pasta, watching bullfights, maybe fighting some bulls himself, who knows? Meanwhile, Jimmy boy, he was running out of time. See, Devin wanted this whole Steiner Phytomaster situation wrapped up by the time he got back, and it had already been 2 weeks. The Steiners were still trucking and still doing what they do best, writing shit about eBay. So, it looked like Jimmy Bean over here would have to resort to Plan B to expedite the finish. And Plan B was a hit. You see, most of Bob Baby's buddies were all former military or police and extremely loyal to him. Bob basically ran a de facto military for eBay, which makes sense that a big company has a personal military. I mean, Halliburton has one, Chiquita Banana had a paramilitary, and I'm sure Amazon has a secret one. I won't tell Jeff. Now, according to some court documents, Bob Baby here, he said that he was going to have his boys, Brian Gilbert and Philip Cook, contact a member of a Samoan gang and, if need be, end the Steiners. He said, quote, once he involved the Samoan gangs, it was out of his hands. Turns out they picked the name Tuile for that Twitter account as the main harassing one to make it more believable that the Samoans were beefing with the Steiners. Thankfully, it never got to Plan B. Didn't even get to Plan A. They goofed the whole shebang up before they could even get through Plan A. Now, as mentioned earlier, Zay was busted. Zay was busted when David Snyder snapped a picture of the rental van's plates. Well, that was the beginning of the end, but it didn't need to be. See, here's where our, quote, professionals, unquote, act real unprofessional and amateurish. A group of women dubbed Jim's Angels by eBay execs, which now knowing how Jim treats his subordinates and his women in his team is kind of distressing. Well, they're the ones who actually fucked a lot of this up. Jim did a lot of the fucking up too, but the ladies were not built like Jim was supposedly. So, because Jim was supposed to be the professional. See, when Zay was in the hotel and had the police drop by her hotel, her, quote, husband was the one who answered. Turned out this husband was actually my boy, Bob Baby. Soon as the police went downstairs, he rushed her out the back and onto a plane. I said this would be very significant because I'm sure, as it stood, they could have probably just lied and could continue their whole harassment campaign. The whole harassing ways, but they ran. And not only did they run, they ran across state lines. And doing so now made it federal. They realized the feds were actually onto them, and to quote every doomsday prepper ever, this shit was hitting the fan. eBay then pulled the trigger on the White Knight thing early and called the Steiners, but the Steiners basically told them to go to hell. Remember when I said that they purchased a nice funeral wreath to send over to them to intimidate them? Well, they actually looked into the funeral wreath and found that it was paid with gift cards purchased by Veronica Zay. The feds traced them, like I said, back to Veronica Zay, and they traced these back to a supermarket where they could actually get footage of her purchasing the gift cards. Back at the ranch, eBay was in full panic mode. They were trying to get rid of as much evidence as possible before the hammer of the feds came crashing down. Obviously, when the hammer did come down, they claimed innocence. When it became public, Steve Weimer said, "I never condoned or participated in these activities." Yeah, sure thing, little buddy. And I'm a marine biologist. Devin Winning actually posted some super fun rants on Twitter, so those were really fun to read. So with that, the jig was up. Now, what happened to our intrepid team of harassers? Now, let's see. Veronica Zay, she was really the only person in the group who seemed to have a conscience. She got about 2 years probation and 1 year under house arrest. The goons, Brian Gilbert and Philip Cook, they got a little bit of justice here. Brian actually got 1 year of probation and some time served. Philip Cook got 18 months, and he did 3 years of supervised release. The GOAT, the big bad Baw Daddy himself, he ended up with 57 months in prison. Now, Steve and Devin, what happened to them, you ask? The ones who were at the very tip top of this whole conspiracy. Well, let's see. Steve was fired from eBay, but was then hired as the head of a local branch of the Boys and Girls Club of America. The organization knows all about him and his involvement in this whole shenanigans, but still celebrates him to this day. I mean, I'm sure the guy who said this, that guy is a leader with integrity I can trust. Wenning resigned from eBay and got a $57 million package and now is on the board for General Motors, proving that bad people with money can do whatever the hell they want and there's no such thing as justice to rich people. eBay did have to pay $3 million in penalties, and they had to pinky promise to be on their best behavior for like 3 years. I mean, $3 million to a company like eBay is literally just Cracker Jacks. Now, the Steiners, they did file a civil suit, and by some serendipitous act of divine intervention, the civil trial actually started on March 3rd, the day I started writing this video. I had no idea that they were until I began researching it and finishing the script. All of a sudden I just saw their trial starts 3/3, and it blew my mind. As of recording, nothing of significance has happened in the trial, as of yet. I'm hoping to get at least some kind of semblance of justice. There was actually a really interesting 60 Minutes piece, which I'm going to link in the description below, and in that special, at one point they had a prosecutor flat out say that things like burn them down, especially from somebody like a CEO, it's clearly just a joke. You can't take it seriously when, in fact, I know for an absolute 1000% reality, if I sent those kind of texts, I'd be in jail. Well, here's hoping that at least some kind of semblance of consequences can come from this, because CEOs, they get away with too damn much. Well, this was a depressing one. All right, if you stuck around till the end, thanks, I appreciate it. I promise the next one will be a little bit happier. If you stuck around, thanks. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, whatever normal YouTuber shit. All right, see ya.